Alright guys, welcome to the part 1 of the C-33 Painting and Decorating Contractors License Study Guide. So I had this study guide taken down. I don't know why, but in a way it's kind of better. So I updated a bunch of information, and it has more information needed to pass the test. So let's get started. And again, before I even start, I want to mention that if anybody wants to donate some money, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee. You can send me some Bitcoin, or you give me a super thanks or a thanks on the YouTube button. So yeah, thanks guys. So what's a C-33 painting and decorating contractor? A painting and decorating contractor prepares by scraping, sandblasting, and other means, and applies the following, so that'd be paints, papers, textures, fabrics, pigments, oils, turpentines, japans, dryers, thinners, varnishes, shellacs, stains, fillers, wax, adhesives, water, and any other vehicles, mediums, and materials which adhere by evaporation, and it may be mixed, be used and applied to the surface of structures and appurtenances thereto for purposes of decorating, protecting, fireproofing, and waterproofing. So when they say waterproofing and fireproofing, typically there's fire coatings that are done if you work with like a lot of big union jobs. For waterproofing, typically this will be like a water barrier, a vapor barrier. It could also be a coating for a roof. So you could also technically do that. You wouldn't have to get a roofing license. So any person in California doing painting projects more than $1,000 must be licensed in the state of California. Remember, if you look at how to get your contractor's license, my brand new video, we talk about how the 500 limit went up to $1,000. Okay, from now on, it's going to be $1,000. Okay, so the reason behind getting a license is to be able to make financial contracts, agreements between contractors and clients, and that will be backed by the terms in a contract. The state, in turn, offers to protect the contractor and clients if both follow the part. As a painting contractor, you must have knowledge in the painting industry, such as prep, finishing tools used, estimating basic construction math, and be able to understand the law and business part behind it. I have the law and business study guide on my channel. Okay, and I also have a bunch of Q&As. Right now it's 2025, so there's going to be a new study guide released. I'm still working on that, but that'll be up there. So the test format, right? Everybody wants to know how's the test? How is it done? Do I have to write in the answer? No, you don't. Okay, so the California Contractor's Trade Exam will be a multiple choice. That means it's going to be an A through D or A through F or whatever letter or whatever amount of it's probably 4 answers to it, or they're going to give you a true or false question. Okay, pretty much it will cover the trade itself, that's painting. So if you don't know what trade means, that'd be your job, your actual construction job. If you pass, you will be notified that very instant. If you don't pass, you will be tasked with rescheduling a date. If you pass one of them, you'll only have to do one test. Remember, it's your trade and the law and business part. The state will send you of course the state's going to send you to the nearest location. Okay, so preparing for paint finishes. There are multiple ways of preparing for an area for painting, from cleaning, moving things around the site, covering, sanding, removing grease, patching, caulking, priming, and finally painting. Every step requires attention and time, as this can result in a very expensive error for you and the client. Based on this, you can lose or gain clients. The state will ask you the basic prep work needed for certain materials. I will mention the ways the state considers right. So obviously what I'm going to mention doesn't have to be the only way, it's just what the state says. Okay, so when we're dealing with metals, so that'd be aluminum, iron, galvanized, steel, etc., any sort of metal. If it is new metal, all new metal needs to be sanded, etched, or degreased. So there's an etching compound, like a liquid, or a degreaser. That'd be known like as a goof off, crud cutter. You could use acetone as well, and if you want to use a little bit more strength, you could even use like an etching acid, like a reduced muriatic acid. It should be primed with a direct to metal primer. Any brand pretty much doesn't matter. Plus, this can also be a rust inhibiting primer. So if you have a primer that's rust inhibiting, typically they're like red oxides, then you can use that too. And then of course you'll finish with a paint that can handle hot temperatures. So the paint can be a regular paint, it could be an epoxy, it could be anything that goes on metal. Typically the best paint is not really best. What's the best? What makes up like any paint stick is the prep work, okay, and the primer attached to that. So remember that. Okay, if it's old metals, old surfaces need to be scraped or grinded to the surface metal. This is typically done when there is a bunch of rust, or it's really like it just really has bad finish and you need to get all that paint off. This will remove the paint layer. Then you need to degrease. So you'll need a solvent such as crud cutter, goof off, acetone, whatever you want to use. If rust is present, then use a rust inhibiting preservative. This is typically like an oil. It's like an oil. You'll put it on and it turns the rust black. Okay, there's different brands out there. Just look up whatever one you want. Then you're going to want to go ahead and prime with the direct to metal primer or any rust inhibiting primer. Then finish with a paint that can handle hot temperatures. Just a quick little side note: rust inhibiting means that it blocks a rust, right, from forming. Okay, so it kind of holds it in and it stops it from forming, and it prevents it from getting wet to where it eventually becomes even more rusty. All right, so if you're dealing with masonry, brick, earthwork, stone, concrete, stucco, if it's new, like concrete, it'll need to be acid washed. They're using muriatic acid to etch the surface. Then you're going to prime with a masonry primer. Then finish with a breathable masonry paint or stain, whatever you want to use. Now, that's only done for concrete, like rock and earthwork and brick, okay? That is not done for stucco, okay? Stucco, when it's brand new, just let it kind of like crack, let it do its thing. Some people leave it even for 6 months once it's applied, so that it can get all its deformities off, and you could patch any remaining little cracks. Then with that, you just go with the primer, a masonry primer, then with the paint that's made specifically for masonry, stucco, and that sort of thing. All right, if you're dealing with any of these surfaces that are old, you're going to want a power wash to remove the dirt, the salt buildup, the efflorescence, the mildew, and the moss. You can also scrape, sandblast, and wire brush, or grind it off, whatever you want to do, right? If there's a paint layer on it and you want to take it off, you can go as far as you want pretty much in terms of prep. You can either go from light prep to a complete removal of the coating to a complete removal of the stucco or the concrete. Doesn't matter. That's all based on what the client wants and what you want to do. You can then prime with the masonry primer after all that prep is done, and finish with the breathable masonry paint or stain, and seal with a water repellent sealer if you want to go with its natural look. All these surfaces should be let to weather after prepping, or let the surface cure for that amount of time. So what this means is, once you do all this sort of prep work, you want to let it weather. That means let it get, because it's probably been humid inside like if a concrete surface or a masonry surface has been painted. Typically, you'll get humidity inside, and what you want to do is to let it vent out all the moisture. If it's a new surface, typically you want to let that cure. That means let all its deformities let all the moisture inside of the concrete, the stucco, whatever it might be, breathe out. That's what it means to let it cure. So prepping for paint finishes. Then now we're talking about drywall and plaster. So if it's new, you want to remove dust from the surface, obviously. Typically this can be done with like a like a mop surface, right? One of those cleaning pads. You could even use use the vacuum on the edges, use a air blower, whatever you want to use. You're going to want to prime with the PVA sealer. PVA is a primer specifically meant for drywall and plaster. And then you want to finish with the paint, whatever you choose to do. Right now, if we're dealing with old plaster and old drywall, typically it's going to be already finished. So that means it's either been sealed with the sealer or it's been painted with any sort of paint. If you're dealing with old stuff, you want to go ahead and degrease the surface depending on the location. Typically, kitchens and bathrooms, any place that has moisture or for example, any oil can get on the walls. That stuff needs to be degreased no matter what. I know some people just go straight to sanding, but honestly, I mean, once you've been in the painting for so long, you already know what to do because of all the things that happen. So degrease no matter what. Okay, from then on, you're going to want to go and sand for adhesion. So sand it. You're going to want to prime any raw areas. So spot prime or prime the whole thing, whatever you want to do. Right? So you could also prime if it's like a really dark color and you want to go lighter. And again, you want to go ahead and finish with any paint of your choosing. Now, if you're dealing with wood surfaces, MDF, plywood, shingles, any sort of finish, right? Or any sort of wood product. If it's new, you're going to want to sand the surface to your desire. Fill nail holes, right? With the filler, it could be wood filler, Bondo, spackle, epoxy, some stain filler, whatever you want to use. You're going to want to prime. Now, the primer comes into play depending on the material you're going to be priming. So, if you're going to be priming MDF, your best bet is to go with like a lacquer undercoat or bin primer or any sort of primer that evaporates quickly, right? The only ones that I've ever used in the past are lacquer, or you could also use shellac as well. Lacquer, shellac, bin primer, whatever you want. Any other sort of finish or wood product or wood surface, you could finish with any primer of your choosing. The reason you want to go with something like that, like I mentioned before, like bin primer, shellac, or lacquer with MDF, is because that stuff will kind of consume onto the particle surface and raise up the grain, and it will constantly raise it up because that's sort of MDF. It needs to be sealed, right? So let's say you primed it, okay. Now what happens if it's stained, right? You could go ahead and stain it, whatever you want to do. From there, you would then give it a light sand to get all the little well, if it's stained, you want to give it a light sand. You don't want to go too deep. If it's primer, you want to sand it really good to knock down all the texture. And then you apply your paint or your sealer. Now, if you're dealing with old wood surfaces, typically, I'm talking like kitchens, doors, windows, whatever it might be, shingles, exterior, especially if you're dealing like with any sort of area that has a lot of salt or moisture, like the beach, for example. If you're dealing with that and it's exterior, you always want to degrease and you want to power wash, depending if it's interior, exterior, right? So if it's interior, degrease. If it's exterior, you want to power wash. You could even do both for exterior, like I mentioned before, if you're going to be working near the ocean because of all the salt buildup. And then from there, you want to go ahead and sand, grind the surface to remove any of the coatings that's filling, or just to scuff the surface to make the new paint stick. From then on, you could go ahead and fill with any filler that you want. You're going to want to prime or stain, whatever you're doing. And then you want to, again, sand with the light paper and then apply finish paint or sealer. So, again, there are many ways to prep surfaces, such as sandblasting, drywall blasting, stripping using chemical stripper, heat gun, needle scaler, whatever. There's multiple ways of prepping a surface apart from sanding and using grinders and brushes and etc. I'll go a little bit more into detail in the following slides depending on the surface, but that'll be for later on. So, preparing for paint finishes, right? How do you prepare for that? most likely you're going to move a client's things if they're present, right? Typically, a lot of clients, what they'll do is they'll leave their stuff even after you told them to move it. Then they don't move it. So that you always got to consider that. You're going to want to protect the work site using plastic, rosin paper, drop cloths, ram board, or whatever you're going to use. Tape should be used on the surface being taped. I'll go into detail on that later. You'll prep based on information mentioned previously, depending on the location. Remember to always check for humidity and moisture. This is a sign that you'll need to degrease before you do any other step. Kitchens and bathrooms are almost a guarantee. If removing wallpaper, make sure to remove the glue underneath the completely, pretty much, or it will blister the paint on the wall. So if you ever remove wallpaper, you know that you're gonna want to wet the wallpaper. They even sell these little scuffing pads, whatever. I've never done that. I just go ahead and maybe give it a light sanding and start wetting. Underneath though, you're gonna get some glue. Make sure you get some TSP, some goof off, and mix it in with some water and clean those walls, because that glue will be on there for a long time if you don't clean it. So get your sponges, your scotch pads, whatever you're gonna need. Any window getting glazing. So this is more old school windows. You should be sure to let that dry out for 7 days before you primer paint. This way that the glazing can dry out completely. It'll still be a little bit tacky, but that'll be enough to where the paint won't crack. When it comes, then you'll sand using an appropriate grit. Remember to grind, patch, prime, caulk, prime, and finally paint. Those are the steps, the most common steps that comes to painting. All right, now we're dealing with exterior. Again, first things first, move the client's things if present, protect the work using plastic, rosin paper, drop cloths, etc. Tape should be used on the surface being taped, and I'll go into detail on what tapes are later on. You'll prep based on the information mentioned previously, depending on the location. Always pressure wash to remove dirt, grime, mildew from the house. Sand using appropriate grit. Grind, patch, prime, caulk, patch, prime, and finally paint. Any window getting glazing, of course, like I mentioned before. 7 days for it let it dry before priming and painting. Wood pretty much any wood needs to contain less than 15% and be able to properly adhere paint to its surface. If water is present and it penetrates into the layer, it will cause blister and peel. So remember, the wood should always be less than 15% in terms of moisture level. All right, composition of paints in construction. There are 5 main properties in paints. These are pigments, and what they do is they provide color, opacity, and sometimes corrosion resistance. There's binders, also known as resins. They help the paint adhere to surfaces and form a protective film. You got solvents. So carriers, right? It dissolves the binder in pigment, making the paint liquid for application. You got additives, enhances specific properties such as durability, drying time, and resistance to mold. And finally, you got extenders, also known as fillers. So this improves the texture, controls the gloss, and reduces the cost. So these are properties. These properties have different jobs in the paint when it comes to the paint product. So you got adhesion, ability to stick. So different surfaces like concrete and metal. You got durability. So all these properties affected differently. You got the resistance to environmental conditions like UV exposure, moisture, and abrasion. You got opacity. That's also known as hiding power. The ability to cover the surface, conceal underlying materials. You got your drying time. So you got time required for the paint to set and properly cure. You got some paints that'll dry out like in 1 day, some that take 7 days to fully dry out. So that all depends on what's been added to the paint. You got your gloss and sheen, the level of light reflection. So it could be satin, matte, high gloss, etc. You got your weather resistance, right? The protection against rain, humidity, temperatures. Chemical resistance, ability to withstand exposure to chemicals, oils, and solvents. Flexibility, resistance to cracking and peeling due to expansion. You got washability, ease of cleaning without damaging the paint. You got toxicity and VOC content. So a lower volatile organic compounds reduce environmental health and health hazards. So just remember, these are little keywords when it comes to painting. Most likely this will be brought up on the exam. So you don't got to know everything in painting when it comes to wording or vocabulary, but these are some of the most important parts. So we're going to go into detail what each one means. So adhesion ensures the paint sticks well to the surface, preventing peeling and flaking over time. And this is important for surfaces like concrete, metal, or wood, which may require primers for better adhesion. You got durability, determines how long the paint lasts under different conditions, right? High durability means the paint resists fading, cracking, and peeling over years of exposure. You got opacity, hiding power. So it defines how well the paint covers the surface underneath. So typically, what color are you painting, right? So if it's like a super dark color and you're gonna go with the lighter on top, you want something that's gonna cover that dark color. This will affect the number of coats required to completely cover a previous color or stain. You got your drying time. This will impact how quickly the paint sets for application. Faster drying times can speed up construction projects, but may require careful environmental conditions. You got your gloss and sheen. So glossy paints reflect more light and are easier to clean, but may highlight imperfections. Matte finishes hide surface flaws but are harder to clean and maintain. So remember, the glossier, the better it is to clean, and the flatter, the harder it is. But again, gloss you'll see everything more in view in terms of all defects, and if you go with the flatter finish, of course you're going to see less imperfections. So weather resistance projects are it protects against damage from rain, humidity, temperature exposure, essential for exterior paints to prevent water infiltration and surface deterioration. So what's chemical resistance? So chemical resistance helps the paint withstand the exposure to cleaning agents, acids, oils, and other chemicals. It's important for industrial or high traffic areas where exposure to chemicals is frequent. Flexibility allows the paint film to expand and contract with the temperatures changes without cracking, crucial for exterior paints, especially in areas with significant temperature fluctuation. Washability determines how easily stains and dirt can be wiped off without damaging the paint. So higher washability is needed for kitchens, bathrooms, and commercial spaces. You got toxicity and VOC contents. This will affect indoor air quality and health. Low VOC and non-toxic paints are preferred for residential and indoor use to reduce harmful emissions. So what are solvents? Solvents are liquids used to dissolve and disperse the binder. The resin. Pigments, additives, and paints, making it easier to apply. Once the paint is applied, the solvents evaporates, leaving behind a solid film. So what are the functions of solvents and paints? So this will adjust viscosity. This means controls the thickness of the paint for smoother applications. It improves application, so helps the paint spread evenly on surfaces using brushes, rollers, and sprayers. And this will also aid in drying. So solvents will evaporate after application, allowing the paint to harden and form a durable coating. This will also prevent clumping, so it keeps paint ingredients well mixed and prevents premature drying in the can, and enhances surface penetration. So it helps paint seep into porous surfaces like wood and concrete for better adhesion. So what type of solvents are in paint? So you got water, right, which is water-based paints used in latex and acrylic paints. So they got low toxicity, low odor, and are environmentally friendly. You got faster drying time and easy cleanup with water. Next, you would have your organic solvents. This is better known as oil-based paints. So used in alkyds, epoxies, polyurethanes, enamel paints. So stronger adhesion and durability, but higher VOCs. So it's more dangerous, more toxic. An example of these that I'm pretty sure you guys have all seen are your mineral spirits, so common in alkyl paints. You got your turpentine, traditionally used for oil-based paints. You got your xylene and toluene, found in industrial coatings. You got your acetone and alcohol, so used in specialty paints and primers. So I'm just gonna give you guys a little quick heads up on the paints there are, right? The paint type. So you got your latex or acrylic paint. Again, solvent will be your water base, low odor, easy cleanup, and quick drying. You got your alkyd paints, which is be your oil-based paint. You got the solvent would be mineral spirits and turpentine. So it's better for, it has a strong adhesion, but it does take longer to dry, obviously. You got your epoxies, typically, and your polyurethane paints. Typically, these are made from xylene or toluene. It has high durability and chemical resistance. You got your lacquers and industrial coatings. Typically, these are made from acetone or alcohol, and they're fast drying and produce a high gloss. What are binders in paint? Binders, also known as resins, are the film-forming components in paint that holds the pigments together, particles together, and help paint adhere to a surface. Once the solvent evaporates, the binder hardens to form a protective and durable film. Functions of binders in paint. So adhesion. It helps the paint stick to surfaces like wood, metal, and concrete or drywall. Durability. Determines the paint resistance to weather, moisture, and wear. Flexibility. It helps prevent cracking and peeling by allowing the paint film to expand in contrast. And it also controls, or it helps with the gloss and finish. So this will control the sheen level. So what do you guys are, whatever you're choosing. So it could be a matte, satin, semi-gloss, high gloss, whatever it might be. You got a chemical and water resistant, right? It improves the paint ability to withstand water, chemicals, and harsh conditions. And it will also provide UV resistance. So some binders provide protection against sun damage and fading. And here we have basic binder types, right? If we're dealing with acrylic, remember this will typically be latex and latex paints and exterior paints. So you got your quick drying and UV resistance if it's for exterior, and it's flexible. If you're dealing with any alkyd paints, so oil based, the common uses for that would be for wood, metal, industrial paints. So the properties would be that it's durable and glossy and slow drying. An epoxy will be typically used in industrial and marine and flooring paints. So of course it's going to have a strong adhesion and chemical and water resistance. If you're dealing with polyurethane will typically be used in wood finishes and floor coatings. So it's tough, abrasive resistant, and glossy. If you're dealing with vinyl will typically used for interior latex paints, and it's an economy paint. So it's typically it's affordable, right? So it's not expensive. So it has good adhesion, it's cost effective, however, it is less durable than acrylic. You also have your silicone binder. So silicone binders offer high temperature coatings, and they're waterproof paints. Typically, these will be used like on roofings. Okay, so on roof coatings where you got flat roofs, and you would roll on the roofing material. So it's heat resistant, water repellent, and flexible. And then lastly, you would have your natural oils. This would be your linseed, tung oil, whatever it might be, any sort of oil that's used for wood, because that's what they typically are for. So your traditional wood finishes, right? Your oil-based paints, penetrating, it's durable, and however, it is slow drying. So how do binders affect paint performance? So acrylic binders are common in water-based paints. They offer flexibility, quick drying, and UV resistance. Alkyd binders are found in oil-based paints, providing durability and a smooth finish, but require longer drying times. Epoxy and polyurethane binders are used in high-performance coatings for industrial, marine, and flooring applications. Silicone binders make paint resistance to heat and moisture, making them ideal for waterproofing and exterior protection. What are pigments in paints? So pigments are finely grounded in solid particles that give paints its color, opacity, and protective properties. They do not dissolve in the binder or solvent, but remain suspended in paint mixtures. So they stay throughout the paint, right? They're not at the bottom, they're at the top. They're moving constantly. The functions of pigments are to provide color. This will determine the paint's appearance from bright hues to natural tones. It improves opacity, right? So the hiding power, because obviously what color are you going to be going over? So it helps cover underlying surfaces and previous colors. It enhances durability. Some pigments protect against UV rays, corrosion, and weathering. Increases reflectability and absorption. Some pigments influence how heat and light interact with the painted surface. It reduces cost. So extender pigments help bulk up the paint while maintaining quality. So types of pigments in paints. So prime pigments, this would be known as color pigments. These provide actual color and opacity in the paint. So that'd be titanium dioxide. So it's a bright pigment with excellent hiding power. You got your iron oxide, so it provides reds, yellows, and brown shades common in industrial and exterior paints. You got your carbon black. These are used for deep black shades and coatings in automotive paint. You got your chromium oxide green, a stable green pigment often used in exterior and industrial applications. You got your ultramarine blue, a deep blue pigment used in artistic and decorative paints. So these are all different functions, or these are all different pigments in paints. And of course, there's more. There's mixes. There's a bunch of stuff out there. So we also have extender pigments, also known as fillers, right? So each one does something different. So these extender pigments improve texture, strength, and cost effectiveness, but do not contribute to color. So the ones on top are called color pigments, and they offer the look of whatever color you want. And the ones on bottom, they just help with the next step in paint. So the texture and the strength. So an example of these would be calcium carbonate. That'd be chalk. So that will reduce the gloss, also known as a flattener, improves adhesion, and enhances durability. You got your silica, so your quartz powder. It improves abrasion resistance and hardiness. You got your clay, also known as kaolin. It improves paint consistency and application properties. And you got talc, so it enhances smoothness and moisture resistance. So you got your special effect pigments as well. So these provide functional properties beyond color. So metallic pigments, also known, so these would be like aluminum, bronze, zinc, and dust. These are used in coatings for corrosion resistance and reflective finishes. You got fluorescent and phosphorescent pigments. These would glow in the dark or offer high visibility coating. So this would be like for like the streets or any marked area for parking. You got anti-corrosion pigments. So this would be your zinc, phosphate, and your red lead. It protects metal surfaces from rust. So remember, this would be like more like your rust inhibiting primer. And you got your thermochromic and photochromic pigments. So these change color with temperature and light exposure. And how are pigments? How do pigments affect paint performance, right? So the more pigments you have, the better hiding power. So your higher opacity. And high quality pigment resists fading under UV light and weather exposure. Certain pigments improve durability and preventing rust or chemical damage. Extender pigments help control gloss and reduce production costs. So remember the I guess the more pigments in the paint, the better. That's pretty much what this is saying. So, what are additives in paints? Additives are special ingredients added in small amounts to enhance the performance, durability, and application properties of paint. They improve characteristics such as drying time, resistance to mold, ease of application, and weather protection. Functions of additives in paint are what? It will improve flow and leveling, prevent brush or roller marks for a smooth finish. It'll control drying time, so this will speed up or slow down drying based on environmental conditions. It will enhance durability, so this will provide resistance to moisture, UV rays, chemicals, and abrasion. It will also prevent mold and mildew growth, so this is essential for high humidity areas like bathrooms and kitchens. Another function would be to reduce surface defects, so it prevents issues like bubbling, sagging, and cracking. And lastly, it will modify gloss and texture, so this will control the sheen and the feel of the dried paint, right? Or some paints are like rougher, some paints are smoother. That's what it means by that. So here we have the types of additives that are in the paint. So you got anti-settling agents. This will prevent pigments from settling in the can. So this will help it so that it doesn't stay at the bottom, right, where it will settle down. So this helps maintain consistency and store paint. You got your thickeners and rheology modifiers. So this will control the viscosity, so the thickness, and this will prevent dripping and improves application. You got your drying accelerators, your catalysts. So if you don't know what a catalyst is, it's pretty much like a two-part epoxy, right? You got your regular paint, and then you got your hardener. That's what a catalyst is. So it speeds up drying time, useful in cold weather or quick drying paints. You got your retarders, right? So slow drying agents. So the retarders, what they do is instead of accelerating or making it dry out faster, it will make it dry out slower. So help you work with the product more. So this will slow it down. This will what that does is slow down. It slows drying time, helps when painting in hot or dry climates. You got your UV stabilizers, so this will protect against sunlight and fading, typically used in exterior paints and automotive coatings. You got your anti-foaming agent, so this will prevent bubbles and foaming, ensures a smooth, uniform finish. You got your fungicides, so mildicides, and this will prevent mold and mildew. So this will typically be used in bathrooms, kitchens, and humid environments. Corrosion inhibitors, so protects metal surfaces from rust, typically used in industrial and marine coatings. You got your adhesion promoter, so it improves paint grip on different surfaces, paint and typically used on plastic, metal, and glass coatings. You got your matting or your flattening agents, so this will reduce the gloss for a matte or flat finish. This will be used typically in flat or matte paints or decorative finishes with different tones. And lastly, you got your water repellent, so this will enhance water resistance. So exterior walls so this is typically used on exterior walls, wood, and concrete surfaces. So how do additives affect paint performance? So this anti-foaming agents prevent air bubbles that can ruin a smooth finish. Thickeners help paint stick to vertical surfaces without dripping. So this is why some paints run faster than others, right? You could just even brushing it on, some paints just no matter what won't stick, and you'll get runs and drips and little saggings going on. You got your drying control agents, so this will allow painters to adjust paint setting time for different weather conditions. You got your fungicides and your mildicides, so this will extend the life of paint in humid environments. And you got your UV stabilizers. This will prevent fading, making them essential for door applications. So here are some of your extender types. I'm not going to go any more into detail with this, only because the state isn't going to ask you this information. I'm putting it up here just so you guys get a good idea of what they are. So how do extenders affect paint performance? So higher extender content means lower gloss. So obviously the more you start to extend the paint or reduce the paint, the flatter it's going to start looking, and it's going to start affecting the color that it has. So silica base extenders, this will increase hardiness, making paint more durable for floors industrial use. You got your talc and clay. Those improves smoothness and workability, reducing the visible brush strokes. And you got your calcium carbonate, so this makes paint more affordable without significantly impacting opacity. And you got your zinc oxide and barium sulfate. This will improve resistance to hard conditions, making them ideal for exterior and marine coatings. So now we're going to go something different. Types of coatings and their uses in construction. Coating serves different purposes in construction. This will range from decorative finishes to protective layers against moisture, chemicals, and physical wear. Here's an overview of the main types of coatings and their applications. So, these are your basic paints that most likely your store has, right? So, what's the purpose of a paint, right? The purpose of it is to provide color, aesthetics, and some level of protection against weather, moisture, and UV rays, right? That's why you paint an exterior. It's not just to make it look good. It's also to protect the wood. It's to protect to protect pretty much the building from exposure to weather, to bugs, to dust, to anything that could enter a home. That's what it's meant for. Apart from it, giving it a good amount of color to make it stand out. So we're gonna go with paint types, right? So acrylic, also known as latex paint. So it is a water-based paint. It's quick drying and it has low VOCs. It's typically used in interior and exterior and walls and ceilings. So you got your alkyd-based paints. So this is a durable, smooth finish. And it also has a longer drying time. This is typically used in wood, metal, trim, and doors. You got your epoxy paints. So these is typically used in high durability, for its high durability, chemical resistance. So it's typically used in industrial floors, garages, marine applications. You got your polyurethane paint. So this will typically be glossy, abrasion resistant, and UV resistant. Again, it's typically used in wood floors, marine coatings, in high traffic areas. You got your enamel paint. So this is hard, glossy finish and wet water resistance. This will typically go on furniture, appliances, and metal surfaces. You got anti-corrosion paint. So this will contains rust inhibitors. So it helps prevent rust from forming. This will be used on steel structures, bridges, marine applications, etc. And lastly, you would have your fire-resistant paint. So intumescent coatings. So this will expands in heat to protect the structure. So this is typically used on steel beams, tunnels, and fire exits. If you've ever been to a garage, like a parking garage, and you've noticed these metal beams and how they have this coating of it looks like rocks or something, or like if it was stucco blasted or something, that's what that is. That's fire resistant paint or a fire resistant coating. So what are sealers and primers, right? So the purpose of a sealer and a primer is to improve adhesion. To block stains and to prevent moisture penetration and enhance the durability of top coats. So an acrylic primer seals porous surfaces and improves adhesion. This can typically be used in drywall, masonry, and previously painted surfaces. If you're gonna, I'm just gonna bring this in. If you're gonna prime drywall, you always want to go with the PVA. Okay, a PVA primer. This is just what the state considers fine, but remember, drywall always needs to be PVA. So, and next up is your alkyd primer. So, alkyd primer offers better penetration, but it has a longer drying time. This will typically be used on wood, metal, and exterior surfaces. Shellac-based primer. This would be your strong stain blocker. It will block smoke damage, water stains, and wood knots. You got your concrete sealers. This will protect against moisture, chemicals, and wear. Typically used on concrete floors, driveways, and basements. You got your waterproofing sealers. This will create a water-resistant barrier. This is typically used in basements, foundations, and bathrooms. And lastly, you would have your silicone-based sealer. This will offer high water repellency. It is UV resistant and is typically used on stone, brick, and concrete surfaces. So now we're going to go on to epoxy coatings. So the purpose of epoxy coatings will be it's a heavy duty coating providing chemical resistance, durability, and waterproofing. So there are different types of epoxy types. So what are they, right? So 100% solid epoxy is thick, self-leveling, highly durable. So typically this will be used in industrial floors, factories, and warehouses. You got your solvent-based epoxy. This will penetrate the surface and it has good adhesion. This will be used on concrete coatings and garages. You got your water-based epoxies. So this will be typically used. So the water-based epoxy offers lower VOCs and easier application, and typically used in commercial floors, hospitals, and homes. You would then have metallic epoxy. This is more of a glossy decorative finish. This will be used in showrooms, restaurants, and high-end interiors. And lastly, you would have your anti-slip epoxy. So this contains grit or aggregates for traction. So this will be used in walkways, ramps, and wet areas. All right, now we have polyurethane coatings. So what's the purpose of a polyurethane? It's to provide a high gloss, UV resistant, and abrasion resistant surface. So we got different types of polyurethane. What would they be? Those would be your aromatic polyurethane. It has a high durability, but it's UV sensitive, so it's not going to last long in the sun. This would be more for interior. So this would be for industrial coatings and chemical plants. You got your aliphatic polyurethane. This is UV resistant, and it has a glossy finish. So it would be typically be used because of its UV resistance in outdoor furniture, floors, and automotive coatings. And lastly, you got your moisture cure polyurethane. It is tough and chemical resistant, and it typically used in wood floors, gymnasiums, and marine coatings. You would have what's another type, right? You got your bituminous coatings, so your asphalt coatings. So if you don't know what that is, it's pretty much like your roofing material, right? So this, you could go on shingles, it could go on your roofing shingles. You could spray that. It's a paint that's used for roofs now. So it looks like any other paint. You spray it on the same, or you roll it on, and it goes on roofing shingles. You could also have like a waterproofing material, and that'll go on flat roofs. So the purpose of it is to provide waterproofing and corrosion protection for concrete and steel. So bituminous coating types are, you got your bitumen paint. So it is So it is waterproof, flexible. So this will typically be used in underground pipes, foundations, and roofing. You got your modified bitumen. So it is UV resistant, flexible, and typically used in roofing, bridge decks, and pretty much damp proofing. So you got your coal tar epoxy. So think of this as a thick, chemical resistant epoxy. It will be used in marine coatings and wastewater plants. So let's go on to powder coatings. So what do they do, right? They provide a highly durable and uniform and eco-friendly finish on metal surfaces. So you would have only two types of this sort of coating. So you got your thermoset powder coating. So it's heat cured, highly durable, and it's typically used on appliances, car parts, and outdoor furniture. You got your thermoplastic powder coating. So it is remettable, flexible, and is typically used in pipes, railings, and playground equipment. You got your anti-corrosion coatings. So typically this will prevent rust, degradation of metal surface. So this will prevent rust from forming and help it stay, I guess, as good as it can get, right, when you're dealing with exterior metal, because over time it will rust. So these are so we got anti-corrosion coating types. So you got your zinc-rich primers. So it's galvanic protection against rust. So typically used in bridges, steel structures, marine applications. You got your polyurethane coatings. So this will be a UV and chemical resistant. So typically used in pipes, storage tanks, offshore platforms. And you got your epoxy zinc phosphate coating. So it has strong adhesion, rust protection, and will be used in industrial machinery and shipbuilding. And now we have fireproof and heat resistant coatings. What do they do? Well, it protects structures from fire, extreme heat, and high temperature exposures. So you got your Bituminous paints. So expands in heat to form an insulating barrier. So it will be used in structural steel, fire exits and tunnels. You got your ceramic coating, so this will reflect heat and it's non-flammable, typically in industrial furnaces, aircraft engines, etc. And you got your silicone based coating, so this was high temperature resistant, typically used in exhaust systems and chimneys. You got your waterproof and hydrophobic coatings, so this will so these type of coatings repel water, prevent moisture damage, and improve longevity of structures. So we got your elastomeric coatings, right? It's flexible and it bridges small cracks, typically used on concrete walls, stucco, and roofs. You got silicone water repellent, so this will penetrate surfaces. So sorry about that. So silicone water repellent, so this will typically penetrate a surface. It prevents water absorption, so this will block those cracks. Typically used in brick, masonry, and stone facades. And polyurethane coating, so it's highly durable, fast curing, waterproof layer, and used in roofs, parking decks, and pipelines. Remember, this is just a basic list of coating types in the painting industry. There are more than these, and in other industries even so. So the painting trade is constantly changing, so always update your knowledge. So remember, guys, if you don't want to go one by one like I just did, that's fine. So you don't got to worry about it, about all these coatings. It's just a good idea to understand it. Remember that the state's going to typically just ask you on the basic coating type. So you got your oil-based, water-based, latex, alkyds, etc. You might get a question and it might tell you, hey, if you're going to be painting a room, what type of paint are you gonna get, right? It's just a simple question like that, and it might offer 4 different answers. One might say latex, another one, and it'll say, and the next two it'll say water based, right? One might say alkyd, oil based. Another one might say epoxy. Another one might say an enamel. Most likely, if you know the basic the basic types of paints and what they're used for, you're gonna go with the latex paint, right? Because it's water based. California is pretty much water based. Latex is the only one that's suitable for a wall. So those are the type of questions you're gonna get. So pretty much this is it, guys. Stay tuned to the next one.